In the news this week, government fails to secure citizenship reforms as crossbenchers retaliates.
Plus new taxes, tough state budget measures to repair the government's financial woes.
And on Western Perspective, counting the cost, the aftermath of the 2017 state budget.
This is the Evening News.
Good evening. The row over citizenship reform continues as the Turnbull government struggles to convince crossbenchers to support the bill in the Senate. Under new rules, permanent residents will have to wait longer before they become Australian citizens. Multicultural leaders fear the new measures will divide the society. Andrew Fuster reports.
New citizenship legislation requires permanent residents to wait 4 years and pass a university-level English test before applying to become a citizen. Tony Burke, Labor MP, says the English competency test is something not even Australians could pass.
They have in front of us legislation which should be withdrawn because it deals with a problem that does not exist.
Multicultural groups labelled the citizenship reform as unfair, with fears the new legislation will create a new underclass of permanent residents and harm Australia's cultural integration.
Talk about multiculturalism being the glue that holds our society together. Well, this is no way of ensuring that multiculturalism as a public policy is to be implemented.
Ramdas Sankaran, president of the WA Ethnic Community Council, believes the reform is un-Australian.
This is precisely what this piece of legislation is going to do. Unnecessarily alienate sections of our population who have come here in good faith on the basis of knowledge and criteria that were given to them when they migrated, and then suddenly turn them this way.
The Turnbull government doesn't have the numbers to pass the reform, with Labor, Greens and the Nick Xenophon team blocking the bill in the Senate. Andrew Fuster, WAMN News.
Premier Mark McGowan has put WA returning to surplus as his first priority in this year's state budget, with the hope that it will put the state back in black in 4 years. Senior reporter Nelson Liu joins us from Parliament House. And Nelson, Treasurer Ben White has rolled out some tough measures to curb debt.
That's right. The state government has made this year's budget all about limiting its spending in a bid to return WA to surplus. It's made jobs and training a major priority, with job creation in a number of areas, primarily through Metronet and investing in education and training. It's also looking to make communities safer, with initiatives preventing methamphetamine from entering WA and stopping domestic and family violence. But as WA continues to face high debt, it's also introduced an increase on payroll tax for big business and increases in royalties for gold and gold mining. The government says introducing the measures was a hard decision to make.
What we've tried to do is share the burden across the community, make sure that not one section alone is bearing the cost of what has gone on in Western Australia over the last 8 years. And I think people understand that.
I think broadly the large corporates, I'm not expecting them to embrace me, but I'm expecting them to at least understand that it's an important part of budget repair, because ultimately I just can't keep going back to the well of household budgets.
The opposition has called the budget a raft of broken promises going back before the March election.
The McGowan government won in a landslide on the policies of no new taxes, no cuts to frontline services, reduction in debt, paying down debt like a mortgage, and a surplus. They've broken every one of those.
The Liberal Party says it'll examine the bills in coming weeks. It's back to you.
Nelson, thanks. WA Police are unlikely to receive the 1.5% pay rise they were hoping for after the state government continued not to budge on a flat $1,000 wage increase offer. Treasurer Ben White hopes the dispute is settled sooner rather than later, with the government remaining firm on the offer.
The Minister Johnson, the Premier, me or the Cabinet, we know what our policy is. We're not going to deviate from that policy. I think we've made that fairly clear to the police union, and I hope that in the end they understand that further industrial action or any industrial action isn't going to sway us from that position.
A statewide audit carried out by the Building Commission will investigate 500 buildings constructed with cladding and conduct a risk assessment test of the buildings to see if they have a high risk of fire spread. The Commission's Acting Executive Director, Ian Munns, explained that the audit will take time. However, people should not be worried if their building is affected.
Well, it is an issue of concern. I guess they would have seen the various images on the TV in relation to events that have happened overseas. But there's no need to be subject to undue concern at this stage, because the Building Commission is taking steps to review all these matters and working closely with local governments.
West Australians who own legal firearms are again urged by authorities to take advantage of the amnesty and hand in their weapons. So far, there were only 521 guns being handed in, making up 2% of the national total of 26,000 guns. WA Police Firearm Licensing Inspector says an explanation for the low recovery rate was similar to the 2013 WA amnesty, which saw more than 1,200 weapons surrendered. The amnesty will continue until the 30th of September this year.
China President Xi Jinping has warned the United States that Beijing strongly prefer negotiations to resolve North Korea's nuclear aggression. Mr. Xi's comment on the state media comes after North Korea claims it has successfully created another nuclear blast. However, President Donald Trump made it clear that the US will not put up with the situation. Philippine President orders the police to allow the media to participate in the authorities' controversial drug raids, permitting journalists to witness the events from start to finish. The announcement was made following a Senate inquiry on alleged innocent killings by officers. Thousands of suspects were allegedly murdered during the raid, triggering criticism from international human rights groups.
And finally this week, some good news for commuters, with the state government making a significant $800 million investment to upgrade transport infrastructure in Perth's northern suburbs. The plan includes heavy rail to Yangchip and road infrastructure upgrades to relieve congestion, create thousands of local jobs, with construction companies being invited to get involved.
The Yangchip extension, Wanneroo Road overpasses, Wanneroo Road duplication, Marmion Avenue, Stevenson Buller Avenue, a number of election commitments, and very pleased that we're here in the northern suburbs able to deliver what is a massive program of transport infrastructure in this area.
And that's Sunday Evening News and Western Perspective. You can follow the latest news on our website and Facebook. Take care.
Until 5:30 next Sunday. Good night.